The Louis Lintow factor, the lie about the 3:30 phone call. It wasn't 3:30, it was 2:35. Phone records prove that. Uh, can someone lie to a grand jury and get away with it? Yeah, he can. Uh, Jimmy Hoffa did it. Why wouldn't Louis Lintow, especially if he had a lot at stake? I don't believe he was evil, in his heart. People that contacted me that worked for him and his supposed girlfriend at the time said he was a nice man, treated him well, but I believe the pressure was on him to stick to the storyline he was given. Then I also, people are going to say, well, Chucky O'Brien, he was given a lie detector test with Jack Goldsmith arranged for it. In later years, he lived, till he passed in his late 80s on February 13th in 2020. And he was supposed to have been exonerated, according to Jack Goldsmith, his stepson, by the FBI. But they never did give him an official letter exonerating him, saying, oh, yeah, you weren't involved, you're innocent. Never did. And Jack puts a lot of weight on this lie detector test. So I looked into that. And a pathological liar, which Jack Goldsmith openly declares his stepfather was a pathological liar. Everybody that knew him said the same thing. They can defeat a lie detector test because it isn't really a polygraph is not really a lie detection device. All it does is it measures impulses and reactions, muscle flinches, things like that, temperature that more honest people can't fool the detection. But a pathological liar that has told a story over and over again and believes it himself can very easily defeat this kind of a so-called lie detector test. So there's no weight in that. And even Chucky O'Brien had said earlier, "Oh no, lie detector tests don't prove anything." And by the way, James Hoffa Jr. didn't take one, so I'm not taking one. So he never did take one. He tried on the Maury Povich, I think, as show, but this later one that Jack Goldsmith refers to was closer to the day of his passing, or when the book was being put together. If anybody does get involved with a crime in any way, lawyers will tell them do not take a lie detector test. They just are not reliable, but they're presented as being reliable. The final question I ask is, am I just trying to pile this up on a man who can't defend himself? In other words, Chucky O'Brien died, and here I am, kind of challenging his claims. And my answer to that is absolutely not. He had 45 plus years to come clean, to say more about what he knew. He knew a whole lot. Whether he admitted to driving the car or not, he could have very well have even left a deathbed confession, just to be true to the Hoffa family. And as you'll read in that letter from the Hoffa children, that's what they expected, even from Chucky O'Brien, whom they learned to, I don't know if I should put words in their mouth and say they despised him, but they knew he was hiding the truth. And they knew he was involved. I don't think my story convinced them of anything they didn't already know, but I think it did fill in some blanks for them. His claim to the concept of omerta, which is, you just don't tell, you don't rat, and so that basically followed him to his grave. He didn't tell anything, not even to Jack Goldsmith. And his stepson, in writing the book, declares, and in interviews he declares, he knows he didn't get the whole truth from Chucky O'Brien. When I called him in 2019, October of 2019, and we spoke, we did email before that, but when we spoke, he basically was sticking to his story that O'Brien was innocent. Hoffa couldn't have been in the car. Linto said the call came in at 3:30. That means it's impossible. And I suggested, hey, just mention the Raleigh house and see what expression comes up on your stepfather's face. But I respect his decision not to tell him. He was very sick, seriously ill at that time, October, because he did pass in February the following year. And so I don't slight Jack Goldsmith at all for not relaying any part of this story to Chucky O'Brien. But I sensed Jack was looking for the truth, which is why I felt he needed to hear the story. On page 161, I give a synopsis of what the FBI said about their report. It was dated October 31st, 1975. They said the LCN, the La Cosa Nostra family in Detroit, or the mob, that all sources believe that Hoffa's disappearance is directly connected with his attempts to regain power within the Teamster Union, which would possibly have an effect on the LCN's control and manipulation of Teamster pension funds. The sources, this is still quoting, the sources indicate further that even though Hoffa cooperated with them on Teamster loans, Fitzsimmons is also cooperating, and as such, the La Cosa Nostra would want to maintain conditions as they are. It's been rumored among sources that Hoffa, while attempting to gain control of the Teamsters, may have provided information to the government in exchange for a favorable decision concerning the lifting of his union restrictions. The FBI never proved this or any other theory, but as the Hoffa files reveal, it was not for lack of effort. The agency pursued virtually every tip and tidbit in its early investigations, which yielded only a sultry amount of hard evidence, but plenty of speculation. Much of both centered around one man, Chucky O'Brien. And I signed that tutto fatto, which means that's it. That's all he got in Italian. And on a light note, I did buy some photographs from the Wayne State University files, so I do own the copyrights, but those are, well, I own the right to use them. Jimmy Hoffa in the early 1920s, he's sitting on a pony. Looks like he's what you'd call husky back then. The pony's about just about the right size for him at that age. Then I get into some trivia. He was born. I'm not going to go through this and read this all to you. You can refer to the book. This talks about his being 11 years old when they moved to Detroit. At 17, he worked for Kroger Grocery and Baking Company. Earned 32 cents an hour. Worked from 4:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And 2/3 of his pay was scrip, which means it was redeemable for food at Kroger Company. I had forgotten that it was 2/3 of his pay. I thought it was only 1/3, but this is accurate when I put it in the book. The source I got that information from is listed there. His net worth at the time of death was $13 million, adjusted for inflation. That's quite a bit of money. He wasn't the first union leader affiliated with the mafia. It was already in bed with the mafia back as early as 1903 to 1907. Cornelius P. Shea founded the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and was its president for those 4 years. And he was connected to the Chicago Mafia, did some prison time for attempted murder. Hoffa was released from prison on December 24th, 1971, Christmas Eve. And I mentioned that evening he was given by the, it was the waitresses and, servers union at Carl's Chop House in Detroit. A week later, though, friends and family of Hoffa put another welcome home party together at the Raleigh house on New Year's Eve. It looks like I skipped over. His birthday was February 14th, 1913. My dad's birthday was June 13th in 1912, so my dad was 8 months older than Jimmy Hoffa at the time of the disappearance. They were both 62. Hoffa was born in Brazil, Indiana. His parents were John and Viola Riddle. His dad, I understand, died from lung disease. He was a coal miner in 1920. So Hoffa was just 7 years old. Although Hoffa disappeared and known he was murdered in 1975, it wasn't for 7 years on July 30th, the same day that he disappeared, 1982, that he was declared legally dead. And a memorial service was held at Holy Trinity Church in Detroit, downtown Detroit. Recapping, his presidency lasted from 57 till 71. So he was imprisoned in 67. So that means he, for 5 years, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, for 4.5 years, he was still president of the Teamsters from prison till he relinquished his presidency to Frank Fitzsimmons. That was supposed to be temporary. Hold it till I get out. And part of the condition for Nixon pardoning him. The occasion at Kroger he was one of the Strawberry Boys, which unloaded produce and fruit on the docks. And I already mentioned he only earned 32 cents an hour, worked 12-hour days, and had to give 2/3 of their pay back to Kroger's for food script. So they rebelled, and that was his first strike attempt, which he was successful at. I don't know what the terms are that he succeeded in getting, but that's what propelled him into Teamster involvement, union involvement. Here's a Teamster. I was a Teamster. Ford, UPS, Consolidated Freightways were all union type jobs. But a Teamster is a truck driver or a person who drives a team of mules or animals, horses. That's where the name came from. It often refers to a member of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, and it's a labor union in the United States and Canada, North America. It was the AFL, or the American Federation of Labor, in 1898. Then the CIO, which is the Congress of Industrial Organizations, from 35 to 55, which was separate from the AFL till 55, when both formed the AFL-CIO. And then the OCCA is the Organized Crime Control Act, 1970 under President Nixon. That's when they went hot and heavy on the mob in Detroit, and they had the Organized Crime Unit working on taking down the mafia in various cities. And then that's also when they instituted the RICO, that's pronounced RICO, Racketeer, RICO. It's the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. And they used that in lieu of having to prove actual, violent acts, crime. Just being involved in organized crime was enough to put people in prison. And that was used extensively to take down the mafia after that. Closing out the notes, resources, and the links, I give the link to the video, but I think I did a better representation on the video in blog number 11 here on YouTube. And I extended and used some graphics to help tell the story that Francis was telling you. I didn't change anything as far as the video itself, except I added some that I took outside of the house when she was living with us. And so although you can watch either one, I'd recommend the blog number 11 for the video. I have a copyright warning in here. I don't think anybody ethically should take it and start making money off of my video that I make freely available. So that's the purpose of that. It's a copyright infringement declaration. But on a personal note, I would even encourage readers, people listening to this blog, to share the link, send the link to your friends. But if I if I start seeing, people are making bucks off of my video, that's not the intent. The intent is to get the story out, not to make people money, including myself. I give some links here. These are important, especially if you're into following up research on this story and others. The FBI transcript I give a link to, although it had imperfections and discrepancies, which I do describe. The FOIPA, FBI transcripts, and the Raleigh House Witnesses. Freedom of Information Act, it'll have redactions, and it'll take you, make whatever inquiries you have to the FBI's Freedom of Information Act brief, specify short date time frames, because I tried to get everything they had on the Raleigh House. They told me it would take them 6 years to get it to me, and thousands of pages. So I had to reduce it to a 30-day time period, in which case I did get some files from them redacted. If you know the story, especially what I've presented and the Hoffa memo, you can fill in some of those redactions with people that you already know who they're talking about. It'll be blacked out, but because of the other information that's surrounding it in the context, it is still valuable. And then there's the vault, which again is redacted, but the vault is a public presentation of FBI documents and files. So I give a link to the Hoffa memo. You can download that entirely. Al O'Brien's alibi, I got multiple sources on that. Wayne State University, and the Hoffa memo, of course. What is a lie detector test and why it can and can't be used for reliable information. There's news agencies, the Detroit Sunday Journal, the Washington Post, Detroit Free Press, New York Times. Newspapers.com is the best of most of them, because you can look up dates, you can look up topics, people, and you'll find newspaper articles. They do offer free membership for a short period of time, then you have to pay for a yearly. I still do it because I'm always looking into more articles. I give a reference to Scott Bernstein. I respect him, although I don't agree with his latest premise about the Licata House and Sal Palazzolo being a look-alike driver of the Mercury, not Chucky O'Brien. He also believes that, I'm not trying to be snide, forgive me. He also doesn't recognize that O'Brien would have driven the car. He couldn't be trusted. But he's not the only one that says that. Dan Aldea, Keith Corbett, himself. I think even David Ashenfelter kind of steers away from saying Chucky O'Brien was the driver of the car. And I don't get that. O'Brien himself says he drove it, and there's a lot of other evidence saying he drove the car. So I don't understand that. It's all based on the trust factor. But Scott Bernstein, I encourage you to look at his Gangster Reports blog. It's not just about Hoffa, obviously. It's about the mafia in Detroit. It's about other things. It's really, when I had lunch with him, though, is when he first told me about the Sal Palazzolo. Do you think your dad may have thought Sal Palazzolo was Chucky O'Brien? And it kind of hit me for a loop, because I didn't know that that's what he thought till then. But anyway, so Scott Bernstein, Gangster Reports is his online blog. Original Gangsters is another podcast that you should check into. The New York Times, I give that link. Biographies. James Buccellato, who, again, I said is a crime writer and a pretty knowledgeable, person that you could check his facts. History, How Stuff Works, I give that, How Stuff Works. Jack Goldsmith, who authored In Hoffa's Shadow. Enjoyed the book. I read it from different perspectives. One, a restored relationship between he and his father, stepfather Chucky O'Brien. He was fatherless as a kid. O'Brien was fatherless as a kid. Hoffa was fatherless as a kid. That seems to be a common theme between all these guys that I just mentioned. And so Jack Goldsmith first met and got to know Chucky O'Brien when he showed up, when he left Detroit after the abduction of Jimmy Hoffa. If I remember right, he was 12 years old at the time when Chucky O'Brien showed up in West Memphis, Arkansas, and became his stand-in father. His own father had left twice, the second time for good. So I felt for Jack Goldsmith. I do believe he wanted to know the truth. I like him personally and everything too. And I read the book about his 20-year, absence or lapse in his relationship with Chucky O'Brien. He no longer wanted to be known as O'Brien because he wanted to be an attorney and to be tied to Chucky O'Brien and be in law school and in the field of being a lawyer. And he was also with the Justice Department during the Bush administration with Ashcroft. So I respect, he's currently a professor of high standing at Harvard Law School. I enjoyed the book on that premise. When it came to the appendix and he started talking about what he calls plausible facts, aren't really facts, they're plausible theories based on what Chuck O'Brien said, and then of course trying to prove O'Brien's innocence. Dan Moldea, I give a link to him. He's also available online. It's his Facebook page. A to Z quotes a lot of Jimmy Hoffa's sayings and phrases that he's famous for. Then, of course, I give the Dropbox links to JHIM Dropbox. Jimmy Hoffa is missing. That's the book. It's my master place where go to if you need updates or information from the book. I give a lot of my resources there rather than in the book because there are just too many to mention. So other than that, the Detroit field office in Detroit, these are the people that received the story too. The field office in Detroit, June of 2006, called and gave the story to Keith Corbett in 2009. He's a retired detective, almost single-handedly responsible for taking down the mafia in Detroit, as I read. He also told me it was safe to talk to Barbara and Crancer. If I remember right, though, I think I already did. I was just trying to get assurance from him that I did the right thing. Barbara Ann Crancer gave the story in 2009. I called her. That's Hoffa's daughter. The next person I gave it to was James Hoffa Jr., and that wasn't until 2019. And that was through two phone messages and then an actual phone call when he called me back in early 2019. Eric Shawn, just before that, because he seemed like a sincere investigative journalist. I had seen his series on Fox Nation and the story about Beaverland, Frank Sharon's story, and ripping up the floorboards. Again, like I told you, it turns out that blood wasn't Hoffa's DNA investigation, but I learned just recently from Jeff Hansen, who supports the Sharon story, by the way. Digging for the Truth is his Facebook site about Charles Brandt, Frank Sharon, and the Beaverland House. He still abides by his research there. It just doesn't fit the story from what I know. But we're good friends. We talk and compare notes. And he's the one that told me that I think he said it was a 12 or 14-year-old boy. I don't remember. I've got it written down. That fell down the stairs, and that's his blood that was on the bottom of the stairway, who died after falling at the Beaverland House. Jack Goldsmith I spoke to 2019, and then again in 2020, gave my condolences when his father passed, and actually prayed for him through an email, email, I think. Scott Bernstein, I gave the story to in November 2019. He did a short blurb. Again, this is before any book existed. and he did a couple of short blurbs, I think January 7th and again in March. But he kind of told the story in vague terms, didn't get all the details right because it was just told to him verbally. And so, I don't know. Bruce Mullen, he's the owner now of Jack's Car Wash, he and his son. His father founded Jack's Car Wash, and I gave you some, what I think is very critical information about Joey Giacalone bringing the car in after the abduction, not before, which rules out Chucky O'Brien. And I'd like to read my ultimate acknowledgments here. Appreciation and thanks go to the following people for their insight and support. Thank you to my family, especially my wife Judy, for cheering me on, bringing me water and food when I forgot all about them. Thank you to my mom and dad, Ken and Francis Tubman, for their sacrificial love as they provided what we needed, not always what we wanted. Your secret's finally out, so rest in peace. Thank you to my sister Helen for helping me to recall the events from 45 years ago. Again, I didn't speak to her until February or even March after O'Brien died, and we compared notes. She's the one who filled me in on the newspaper she saw and overhearing them talk on their camp outing. That was the reason they went to her house that afternoon, and they camped 2 nights at Lake Pinckney Recreation Area. Thank you to my brother Kenneth E. Tubman Jr. for playing the devil's advocate and helping me weed through the details of the story we all knew about, and for the insight he gave. Most of all, I thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for giving me the strength, the wisdom, and in order to suppress and overcome the stronghold of fear. That's the dark force that prevents us all from doing what we know is right. Signed D.W. Tubman. Back of this book has an index that you can use to go through, and then also, of course, there's the free index archive online that I gave in the first few blogs, where you can go through page by page, topic search and stuff like that. It's free. If you want a signed copy of the book and the new edition, I do sign that, and that's available for sale on my Facebook site. It's also available online, but you won't get the deal and you won't get a signature online with Amazon and the other book retailers. But if that's how you choose to buy it, that's fine. Not out to make a killing. I haven't made anywhere near as much as it costs to publish, create, and print this book. But the main element was to get the story out. Much of my satisfaction came from the letter I got from the Hoffa children. So thank you. God bless. I'll let you know on Facebook when I have another blog coming up here soon, and of course any updates. If I split this into 2 parts, it's because it got more lengthy than I anticipated. So thank you for your continued following, liking, friendships, and comments that some of you have been making. And please comment below what direction you think this should take from this point. I want to answer any questions that other people might have. I'm a little sheltered because I see the story from my perspective. Those of you out there I know have other perspectives, and even your skepticism as to whether or not you believe this eyewitness account from Ken and Francis. Okay, God bless. I'll see you on the next blog.